There are battles that take years. There are wars that drag on for decades, grinding, exhausting, consuming everything they touch until both sides have almost forgotten what they were fighting for in the first place. And then, there are 14 minutes. 14 minutes that rewrote a border, that erased one nation, and wrote another into existence, that handed a continent's southwest corner, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, to a country that hadn't even asked for it yet. This is the Battle of San Jacinto, whispered to you from before. 6 weeks. That is how long Sam Houston's army had been running, not marching, not retreating in good order, running, from a man who had never lost, across land that offered no cover, no shelter, and no mercy. He had already taken the Alamo. Every last offender, gone. Weeks later, at a place called Goliad, over 300 soldiers who had already laid down their arms were executed on his direct order. The message was not military. It was psychological. It was designed to make an entire territory ask itself, why keep fighting? And it was working. Sam Houston's men were farmers, ranchers, men whose hands knew plows better than rifles. They were hungry. Their boots were giving out. Some of them had stopped believing the word victory meant anything anymore. And their general, the man they were meant to trust, kept giving the same order. Keep moving. Keep east. Do not stop. Many of his own men called him a coward. They were wrong. On April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston stopped running. What happened next lasted 14 minutes. 14 minutes, and a continent tilted. To understand what happened at San Jacinto, you need to understand what Texas was in 1836. It was not a country. It was not yet even a clear idea. It was a Mexican province called Texian, a sweeping, sun-baked land that the Mexican government had opened to American settlers nearly a decade before, hoping it would help fill and tame the frontier. They did, and then, as settlers tend to do, they started to resent the government that had invited them in the first place. By 1835, the tension had become a rebellion, a rough coalition of Texian settlers and Tejano fighters, Mexican citizens who threw in with the revolution, declared they were fighting for a constitution, for rights, for something they could only partially put into words. On the other side stood General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, President of Mexico, commander of its armies, and a man who had never seriously questioned his own greatness. He did not see a revolution unfolding. He saw a problem to be managed. He personally led his forces north to end it. He came close. The Alamo fell in February, Goliad in March. The Texian provisional government scattered. Settlers across the territory packed their children and whatever they could carry and fled east toward the United States border, a desperate, churning mass exodus that historians would later call the runaway scrape. And Houston kept retreating. East, always east. What no one knew, not even most of his own officers, was that Houston was not retreating out of fear. He was choosing his moment. By mid-April, something had shifted. Houston received intelligence that Santa Anna had divided his forces. The general, confident the rebellion had already been broken, took a smaller detachment and began moving quickly through the Texas lowlands, sweeping up whatever scattered resistance he found, moving without his full army around him, moving like a man who has already won. Houston saw it, the gap, the moment. On April 20th, he led his roughly 900 soldiers to a rise of land near the junction of the San Jacinto River and Buffalo Bayou, a narrow strip of elevated ground, marshland and water on three sides, a natural trap. If you were standing in it, You might not realize until it was too late whether you were the hunter or the prey. Across a flat, open plain, Santa Anna's force of approximately 1,300 men made camp. They had the numbers. They had the experience. They had won every engagement of this war. That afternoon, a brief skirmish broke out, both sides probing, reading each other. Nothing decisive. As the sun fell, both armies settled into uneasy stillness. And then Santa Anna did something remarkable. He ordered his men to rest. He had received reinforcements that day. His scouts had reported that Houston's army was boxed in, bayou at their backs, no route of retreat. In Santa Anna's mind, there was no urgency. He would finish this in the morning. His men stacked their weapons. The guard rotation thinned. Many of them slept. The siesta that followed would become the most consequential rest in North American history. At 3:30 in the afternoon, on April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston gave the order to advance. His army moved across the open plain in near silence. They had destroyed the only bridge behind them the day before. There was no way back, only forward. They brought two small cannons, called the Twin Sisters, as they crossed the grass, within 400 yards of the sleeping camp. Someone began playing a fife, a light, almost absurd little melody, drifting across the field toward an army that did not yet know it was being approached. At 200 yards, the first Mexican sentinel saw them. It was too late. The Texian line broke into a run, and from 900 throats came a sound that witnesses said made the ground shake. Remember the Alamo. Remember Goliad. Those were not battle cries. They were names. Every man screaming them had a face behind the words. A neighbor, a friend, someone who had not made it. The rage in those words had been building for 6 weeks. Now I had somewhere to go. The Twin Sisters opened fire into the center of the camp. Houston's cavalry swept wide around both flanks, sealing the exits. Mexican soldiers scrambled for weapons they couldn't find in the chaos, stumbling over one another in the smoke and noise. What followed lasted approximately 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Over 600 Mexican soldiers fell. More than 700 were captured. The Texian army lost 9 men. 9. Santa Anna himself fled the battlefield, stripping off his uniform, pulling on a private soldier's worn jacket, and disappearing into the tall grass near the bayou. He was found the next morning, cold and muddy, trying to slip away unnoticed. The moment the Mexican prisoners in camp caught sight of him being let in, before anyone said a word, many of them instinctively straightened, stood at attention, and breathed 2 words: El Presidente. The Texians looked at the shivering, frightened man in borrowed clothes and understood they had just captured the most powerful man in Mexico. Staring down an army that had every reason to want him gone, and gone permanently, Santa Anna agreed to sign the treaties of Velasco. Texas was recognized as an independent republic. All Mexican forces were to withdraw south of the Rio Grande. In 14 minutes, a political reality had simply ended, and another had begun. The Republic of Texas existed now, a new shape on the map, one that will hold for nearly a decade before joining the United States in 1845. That annexation would ignite a war with Mexico, which would end with the United States gaining the entire American Southwest. California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado. All of it traces back in a long, winding chain of consequence to one afternoon, one advance across an open field, one general who was asleep. There is something difficult to hold in your mind when you stand at the San Jacinto battleground today. You can walk across that same grass in a few quiet minutes. Birds settle in the trees nearby. The wind moves through the reeds along the water. It is peaceful in the way that very old, very heavy places sometimes are. It does not look like a place where the shape of a continent was decided. But that is what history's turning points are like. They do not announce themselves at the scale of their consequences. They happen in an afternoon, in less time than it takes to finish a meal, and then the world is different. And only later does anyone begin to understand how much. Sam Houston understood one thing with cold clarity, that the most dangerous opponent is not the strongest one. It is the one who has already decided the outcome, because certainty makes you careless, and carelessness in the wrong moment costs everything. Santa Anna had already decided. Houston simply waited for that decision to become a vulnerability, and then he walked through it. If this story reached something in you, if you felt the pull of the unknown, the weight of a long journey, the quiet power of finally creating a home, then you already know why this channel exists. There are more stories like this one. Stories buried in the ancient world, waiting to be found. Subscribe to Whispers from Before, and make sure you never miss a single one. The next whisper is already waiting.